Hi YouTube, this is Boy10 here. This is going to be the first video on this channel. Technically it's not the first video I've ever done, and I think the person who I'm subscribing to is aware of this. So this is a response video to gogreen18's Why Do People Do Fucked Up Shit. Technically this is supposed to be a response video to Zaunstar, but she forgot to do it. Basically the reason why I'm making this response video is because taking class in psychology for my A levels, so I think would be aware of this particular subject. Basically, gogreen18 made a video on Milgram, the Milgram experiment, and explaining why people do effed up shit. And I'd just like to make a few points on it and sort of elaborate on that and make a few corrections. 3 months prior to the experiment, a Nazi war criminal by the name of Adolf Eichmann was going through a trial in Jerusalem. Milgram devised his psychological study to answer the question whether Eichmann and his accomplices in the Holocaust had mutual intent, at least in regards to the Holocaust. Basically, within the experiment, there were 40 participants, and participants were told that they were taking part in the memory test and were told that they would receive $5 for taking part. The participants were given the role of teacher, but an actor took the role of student, and the teacher read a series of wordplays to the student to memorize. The teacher was given an electric shock from the volt generator to give an idea of the shock the student would supposedly receive during the experiment. Each time the student gets the answer wrong, he will receive a shock from the teacher from 15-volt increments to 450 volts, which meant certain death for a person. The participants thought that they were giving shots to a student. In reality, not only was the student not receiving any shots, the actor set up a tape recorder in integration with the electric shock generator, which played pre-recorded screams in conjunction with the shock level. As the voltage level increased, the actor started banging on the wall, separating him from the subject and complaining of his heart condition. At around 300 volts, the banging stopped and the actor gave no answer. When the teacher turned to the experimenter for guidance, the experimenter responded, "The absence of a response will be treated as a wrong answer." After 315 volts, the actor banged on the wall again, but there were no further responses. The experimenter gave full prods to the teacher whenever he questioned the purpose of the experiment or refused to continue. They were, "You must continue, the experiment requires you continue, it is absolutely essential you continue, you have no choice, you must go on." If by those four cues the teacher still refuses, the experiment is halted. Now the first point I want to address is that gogreen18 said in a video that 90% of participants went up to 450 volts. In actuality, out of the 40 participants that went in this study, 26 of them went up to 450 volts, which would mean that it's 65% as opposed to 90%. Basically, I'm a little curious as to where she got the 90% figure from, but I suspect it's entirely possible that she mistook this figure, maybe possibly for one of the variations of the Milgram experiment, one of which went up to 92.5% of participants going up to 450 volts. In this version, the teacher took the role of the experimenter while an assistant who was in actuality a Confederate. Basically, Confederate is a stooge, someone who's in on the purpose of the experiment, administer the shock in complete obedience of the teacher's behalf. However, I should stress that every one of the participants in the first set of experiments delivered to at least 300 volts, even the ones that eventually refused, which would at least deliver an intensive shock. I should also point out that the participants of the experiments were largely regarded as well-adjusted people, and after the experiments, many of the participants were distressed. During the experiment, some were laughing, but not in the sense of sadism, but out of nervousness of the experiment, and they were debriefed at the end of the study, due to research efforts in psychology and stuff like that. I think the latest reproduction of the Milgram study that I've seen is in a BBC documentary called "How Violent Are You?" the results were that 75% of the participants went up to the full 450 volts, but then again, there were only 12 people as opposed to 40 people in the initial study. Now, Milgram had two theories as to why people tend to obey an authority figure. The first theory is the theory of conformism, which is based on Ash's conformity experiment, which describes the dynamic between the individual and the group of reference. Basically, the subject without ability or the expertise will leave decision making, especially in crises, to the group and its hierarchy. Now, the second theory is the agentic state. The person begins to see him or herself as an instrument to the will of the authority figure, relinquishing any source of decision making and no longer seeing himself or herself as responsible for their actions. Once the agentic shift occurs in a otherwise autonomous individual, the essential features of obedience follow. It's kind of like a rationalization of sorts of for the appeal to authority. For example, like he's an expert, he knows what he's talking about, yada yada yada. Out of the atheist YouTubers who refer to this study, they tend to focus specifically on religion. Now, I have no actual quarrel with that at all. After all, it is true that the authority of the Roman Catholic Church and its stance on condoms and abortion up until recently, which to an extent still continue to have a huge effect on Catholics, especially living in the third world, as they're instructed not to wear them. And even with a massive HIV/AIDS epidemic taking place in Africa, Pope Benedict XVI still found it necessary to assert that not only are condoms wrong, but even absurdly suggest that condoms increase the spread of HIV. Also, kind of closer to home is the authority of evangelists, especially televangelists, who give instructions to their audience on how to receive blessings from God and how much money you need to give out in order to do so. And since the unquestionable word comes from the Almighty God Himself, you can ignore medical evidence in favor of a promise of a miracle. However, religious authority and religious conformity is only but one manifestation of the problems that emerge in obedience to authority. Personally, I would have preferred if a broader range of examples stemming from obedience are given, which to be fair, Zaunstar actually did, but he sort of expressed amazement as to why there aren't any more mass murderers in the world, which I'll come on to. The implications presented by the Milgram experiment don't rest solely with the authority figures within religion, but authority figures in general. Like, for example, like in the case of warfare, Milgram himself used the models of his experiments to explain the My Lai massacre, specifically the authority training in the military and how, under orders, soldiers can kill around 500 unarmed Vietnamese people, and most of them women and children. In the case of authoritarian regimes, specifically like Nazi Germany, not just the members of the party, but like the public itself, with a rather healthy dose of effective propaganda, had little objections to the deportation of Jews into concentration camps, and it even has implications in hospitals or in the workplace. In a somewhat unrelated study by Charles Hoffman in 1966, doctors were to request from nurses 20 milligrams of a fictional drug called astroton, even though it was stated that even administering 10 milligrams of the drug was lethal dosage. The study showed that some 90%, 95% of nurses compelled without question. Depersonalization and dehumanization of the targets also strengthens obedience among the subjects to the authority figure, going back to, of course, the Nazi propaganda campaign against the Jews, the My Lai massacre, the Rwandan genocide, which led to 800,000 people killed, was possible through propaganda by those within the assassinated Hutu president's inner circle, which focused on bolstering ethnic pride for the Hutu and referred to Tutsi as cockroach. Then again, religion has a pretty good track record on dehumanizing those who are outside the belief system it presents by giving them derogatory terms like heathen, heretic, infidel, etc. And throughout history, rather gruesome methods were to deal with these outsiders of sorts by hanging them, burning them at the stake, etc., etc. Even up until today, and even in the most industrial countries, derogatory terms are still used to those who don't subscribe to the belief system. I mean, in the case of the Islamic world, like being being a infidel would mean like death, basically. In any case, while I've explained what causes people to obey, even if it violates their personal moral beliefs, I'm more interested in what causes people to disobey, since it's far less easier to. Other than the agentic state, there's also the autonomous state, which is the default state in which we are self-governed and have a sense of personal responsibility for our actions. Those who disobey are able to preserve their sense of autonomy even at the influence of their authority. Now, gogreen18 highlighted a really important reason as to why people disobey authority figures, and that is education. Um, Going back to the theory of conformity, a person with the sufficient understanding doesn't need to appeal to the group or the hierarchy for a solution. For example, of the Hoffman study, which I earlier talked about, if, say, another doctor or more educated nurse is given the instruction to bring the 20 milligram dosage, she is more likely to refuse and challenge the authority of the doctor making that request, because he or she has the understanding that the dosage will likely kill the person. And of course, that's fictional. But my point is that it's a little more complex than that. There was a particularly famous conscientious objector to the Vietnam War. This person didn't have good writing or good spelling, but still um, found a reason to resist being drafted to the Vietnam War. He cited his religion for doing so. Irony of ironies, considering the religion is Islam. And I think one of his quotes is that no Viet Cong ever called me nigger. In any case, other possible reasons as to why people refuse to obey an authority figure include that the person cannot continue to ignore the consequences of their actions when the physical psychological distance is limited. Like, for example, in one variation of the Milgram experiment, obedience fell to 30% when the learner was in the same room. Also, a person who's seen the effects of authoritarian behavior and authoritarianism in general is less likely to continue to obey authority figures. One of the later participants, one Gretchen Brandt, who experienced the Second World War and was in Germany during the time, continued to go on because she said she has seen too much pain and refused to continue further because saying that we are of our own free will. Another why people choose to disobey authority figures is that simply the person may not have a authoritarian personality. Some of the features of an authoritarian personality include a rigid, simplistic line of thinking, favors on law and order, avoids like repressed feelings or psychological explanations. Basically, if the person doesn't have an authoritarian personality, they're less likely to obey authority. Personally, I think autonomy and a sense of personal responsibility for your actions should be encouraged. Out of all the reasons to disobey an authority figure, I think education is the most effective because it challenges blind obedience to authority and it's more accessible. So in that case, I sort of reiterate gogreen18's point. So yeah, this is the end of this video. Basically, I hope gogreen18, if you're watching this, I hope you take these points in. And so yeah, basically also like if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed to either gogreen18 or Zaunstar, I suggest you do so now. Don't sub here seriously because like I'm not sure how many videos I'm going to be making anyway. So yeah, this is Affy Boy. stay thoughtful, stay wonderful.